So welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Living Longer Stronger, brought to you by Rick Chartrand of Sustainable Success, Safe Strength Training. And today I'm joined by Mark. Geez, I should have asked you how to pronounce your last name, probably. Strough?
Strough.
Okay, Strough. No, the GH
Perfect.
is silent, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And he's from Arkansas. He is also an exercise instructor. His facility is referred to as Mark of Health. Before we started recording, we sort of took a little trip down memory lane to see where we first knew of each other on various forums, and I think it goes back to the mid 2000s.
That's correct.
Now I see that we're both fans of Arthur Jones' work, Ellington Darden. We're both involved in high intensity training, and also we're both students of nutrition. And I know that Mark is an advocate, at least for in certain situations, for certain conditions, of the carnivore diet. And today I'm hoping we can touch on some things about strength training, safety, but I'm also kind of taking this from the point of view of a newbie, and this is not, I'm not just making this up, who's intrigued about the carnivore lifestyle and sort of wanted to find out more about it, when it could work or not work and whatnot. So that was a bit of an intro of Mark, but Mark, I'm going to ask you to sort of elaborate a little more and tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and a bit about your journey and the whole fitness and nutrition thing that you've gone through.
Thanks for having me here. And yes, we kind of go back to knowing each other in the virtual world from L. Darden's forum, and that's where we first kind of knew of Richard and a little bit of his history and stuff. You meet so many virtually; it's hard to keep up with everybody there. My history is I've been into kind of as a fitness geek, and I'm wearing one of my old shirts here. I've been into martial arts since I was 9, 10, right in that age group, and one of the guys I think influenced everybody in the late 70s, early 80s in my time frame then was Bruce Lee. So I was that skinny kid like Bruce Lee was growing up in Hong Kong, and couldn't put any kind of mass on or anything. So I knew I needed to lift weights. And so about the only thing I had at that point to know anything about it was his book, Tao Jeet Kune Do. And so that gave me a little bit of insight. And being my mother loved garage sales, I would love finding books and different things. So I stumbled onto some bodybuilding, some lifting books, strongman books, actually from the old era of that time frame. And Perry Reeder was one, Vince Gironda, Vic Tanny, so many others. There was a biography on the Great Gama, and just a lot of those. Eugene Sandow and also the Gouch, Frank Gouch and Carl Gouch. Some of those people in the wrestling, lifting and stuff. So I knew that's kind of what I needed to go into, but I didn't know anything. So every book I could get. And then I ran on to Arthur Jones's news bulletin. And then I ran on to, of course, L. Darden and later Mike Mincer and different ones like that. So that's kind of how the training evolved from there. And in the 90s, I was more influenced by Mike Mincer, one of my martial arts instructors, introduced me to his training. And that really shifted everything. I know with the Arthur Jones training, back in the 80s, that was usually 3 sessions a week, and they would run about, 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And then when we went to the heavy duty training, it was much briefer. And I went to a split body. That's the first time I went to a split body program too.
Okay, now I'm just curious, a little tangent.
Yeah.
Because they were around at the same time, did Bruce Lee, would you know, because I'm guessing you're a fan of John Little too, and probably.
Oh, absolutely.
But John Little's really, both Mike Mincer and Bruce Lee are two of his, I think, idols or people that he really looked up to.
Yeah.
And they're both thinkers. I wonder, did Bruce Lee ever know of either Mincer or Arthur Jones? Do you know, or were there any influences there?
I don't think so. I come from the lineage of Dan Inosanto. That was mine. He was the one that took over his teaching in 73 after he passed away, and that's who I am under. And I have trained with some other of the JKD instructors too. I don't ever recall that in any of his writings, and that's an interesting thing. I don't know if John Little's ever expounded on that or not. I know that a lot of his source material that he had was actually pretty old and actually was probably better than a lot of the stuff in the 60s and 70s, and today definitely so. But that was before the age of steroids when he was getting that. So I would say a lot of his source material would have been probably before the 1960s and 50s.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting. Today, of course, there's a preponderance of all types of fitness information out there, and it's been the case for a long time, and a lot of different points of view have always been expounded. And people often, to this day, when they learn about what we do, sort of abbreviated, more intense, less frequent training, I think it's something new. But in fact, it's been around since the early 70s. And unlike a lot of other things, I mean, there's been some evolution, but it's stayed true based to some fairly basic principles.
Yeah.
But then if you go back beyond that, like some of the people that you named, maybe not Vince Gurgeronda, because he was more of a high volume guy, but in some ways, I find that there's not necessarily as much of a contrast with what he did than even Arthur Jones, when you really stop and drill down to the thinking behind it. But you look at the old books. I have a book here that I got when I was in high school, and I found it online, and I bought it again. It was by a guy named George Kirkley, and it was called Weightlifting and Weight Training. And it was a combination, because at the time, this book was from 1963. Olympic lifting, I don't even know if powerlifting was a thing then. And then the Olympic weightlifting and weight training were sort of often spoken of in the same breath. And if you look at the routines, the beginner routines and the advanced routines in that book, they're pretty low volume. And they never use the word training to failure, but they say, well, do as many reps as you can. And when you can do this many more reps and whatnot. So, even though Arthur Jones was definitely a pioneer and came up, even he, I think, would have said that he didn't necessarily come up with these things.
Exactly. Yeah, he's even said that, and he borrowed heavily from Perry Reeder, and Perry was one of those that would train to failure. Jack LaLanne. I mean, you talk about somebody that I think we kind of downplay his role in fitness and bodybuilding. We think of all the infomercials and stuff that he's more known for, but he was in the 40s, late 40s and early 50s. He was saying train until lift until you cannot lift anymore. He was saying the same thing. And if you look back, a lot of the strongmen, they were training at a very, very low volume. And there's a few reasons for that. One of the reasons are they were making their money off of shows. Well, obviously, you can't train 7 days a week and then go perform, bending a rod of iron and different things. And so they couldn't do that. Also, they didn't have steroids. They didn't have the performance enhancing drugs, which increases your ability to recover from those marathon workouts and different things. So, as we know, the lifting does not make you stronger. It makes you weaker at the moment of lifting.
Right.
It's got to be recompensated later. And if you're a natural athlete, and back before the 60s, they were natural athletes. So they didn't have that luxury. I'm not calling it a luxury that is good. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But and interestingly enough, also was it on the History Channel? They had Eddie Hall and had some of these modern day strongmen trying to replicate the feats of the old ones. They couldn't do it. And you look at these guys that are monsters in size now, and then you look back at some of these other ones. They were tiny compared to them as far as this, but there's the performance enhancing drug plays a lot of part in that. And I think also what changed some of that was, of course, Mr. Weeder and some of the others that wanted to have their trainers and their gyms filled people working out not once, twice, or 3 times a week, but every day of the week. So there was definitely a big influence on that. And when they controlled almost the whole narrative, outside of a few lone voices like Arthur Jones and L. Darden and Mincer, they didn't have much of a megaphone at that time. And here you're hearing, you get your latest muscle and fitness magazine. Okay, here's the new workout that will make you look just like, whoever the champion was, if it was Arnold or whatever. And, then next week or whenever the next magazine would come out or another magazine similar to it, okay, now try this workout. And everything was built upon doing more and more and more. If you didn't get enough results, you need to do more. You're still not getting results, you need to do more. And it sold gym memberships, it kept trainers busy, but you had a lot of people that ended up not getting any good results. They got probably more injuries than anything, and they left, they quit. So yeah, it's hard to compete with that.
Well, and they ignored the role of genetics, right? And sometimes when they did bring it up, I remember reading articles that would actually challenge it and say, that people who cited genetics as a factor were making excuses, and that if you just worked out properly and took the right supplements or whatever, that you too. I remember Rich Gaspari. I don't know if you remember Rich Gaspari.
Yeah, I do.
Claiming to have poor genetics and have overcome his poor genetics. And I'm thinking, I mean, even, if you're anywhere near a world-class bodybuilder, which he was, then you have, 1 in a million genetics. I don't care what anybody says. It's simply not possible. Even, and Jerome Armstrong, I mentioned before we started recording, in an article he did about that guy, the Liver King, pointed out that, without the proper genetics, even steroids, it'll make you bigger than you normally be. But nothing can have you outstrip your genetic potential, right?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, do you think that Boyer Coe did not work his abs? I mean, he genetically did not have abs. I mean, he had everything else, but he did not have any separation in his abdominal area. Was it lack of working out? No, he worked out like crazy. He trained with Arthur Jones even, and he had no abs. Do you think Tom Plants, I mean, his legs were as big as they were because he worked out harder than Frank Zane or even Arnold or Mike Mincer or any of those guys? No, that was genetics. Yes, did he work out hard? Yes. Was he on steroids? Yeah. But everybody else was on steroids too. So they're on an even playing ground. So genetics play a huge role in it. And I don't know why. Well, I do know why. But, it's just like, if I want my hair to be a different color, it's not, I don't have control over that unless I get some dye, but that didn't change it. I can't change my height. There's so many things you can't change. I can't change where my muscle bellies and the length of my arms and where my tendons connect, the insertion points. I don't have control over that. And if people think that they can, they're have been mistaken, or they're not telling the truth. Now, obviously, if I took steroids, I would be at my maximum potential that I could get. Would I get huge? Probably not. I'd get bigger and probably super lean without even trying. But it still wouldn't make me anywhere near what a champion bodybuilder or just even a casual bodybuilder that has the right genetics would be. And I don't side in with, no, it's my genetics. It's my genetics. I don't want to side into that and just use it as an excuse. But it's real. I mean, it is a real thing. And you can, and that's what everybody has to be comfortable with. I could only be hitting half of my genetic potential and then blame it on my genetics. Well, that's kind of a cop out.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, I'm probably not going to reach 100% potential, but I mean, I think I should be able to reach, 75 or higher without, just an inordinate amount of work. So I think some people do use it a little bit as a cop out, but it is a real thing.
Well, the reality is, I think that obviously genetics is. I mean, if you're Bruce Lee, going back to him. I mean, there's some pictures on the internet of him doing this incredible lat spread, and various pictures. If you remember some of the pictures from Enter the Dragon, and whatnot, and I often use that as an example.
Yeah.
I say, listen, he didn't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he looked darn good.
Oh my goodness. And see,
Because
that was always my model, how I wanted to look. And I could get the extreme amount of leanness as him, no problem. I can get lean. That may be my superpower. I can get lean very quickly if I so choose. It's not hard. And I got really great definition. But did my lats look like him? Did my back look like him? No. And it was very frustrating. And at that time, I didn't have any understanding why. I thought, well, I'm doing everything he was doing. I mean, his workouts are laid out. Muscle and Fitness magazine did. I know I just demonize them, but I was just. I still have a copy of it, and they went in there maybe 20 years ago. I said, Bruce Lee was a genius on exercise, and this was his routine and everything like that. Now, does it fit into HIT? Obviously not. He was a workaholic. I mean, that was his thing on everything. He did not have in his lexicon moderation. That just was not his thing. But he did know to train to failure. That is one thing he did. But did he use volume? Oh my goodness, he used loads of volume. And so some of the conceptions he had was probably not correct today that we know. But yeah, I mean, even though I tried to look just like him, I couldn't. My genetics are different, so I can blame that on my parents, I guess.
well, another confounder other than genetics is leanness.
Mhm.
Because when people are able to achieve good leanness, they appear to be more muscular.
Yes, they do.
Because with the exception of, what we refer to as the mass monsters who are like 300-pound guys jacked up on steroids with the stomachs that are protruding.
Turtle belly.
If you
Yeah.
look at
Up to here.
Yeah, if you look at like Frank, let's use Frank Zane or
I love Frank
help
Zane.
me out, Hercules from the 50s, Steve
Oh,
Reeves.
Red Park.
No, Steve Reeves.
Oh, Steve Reeves. I'm sorry. Yes, Steve Reeves.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Red Park would be a good example too.
and if you were to, and I don't know this for a fact, but I remember the first time I went to an amateur bodybuilding contest. It was just a regional bodybuilding contest. But the guys, to me, from my point of view at that point in time, they were like, wow, these guys are incredible. And then I wound up that it was a pretty low budget thing. The guys were changing and getting ready in a public washroom next to the stage. And I wound up standing up next to one of the competitors. And when I stood right up next to him, I thought, oh, it was a bit of a letdown. It was like, this guy's not nearly as big as he appears on stage. So between the leanness, the proper posing, the tan, the shaving of the hair, the lighting and all that other stuff.
Diuretic.
Yeah, and not to mention, if you're seeing their pictures in a magazine, then these days there's even photoshopping and stuff like that. Is that it can be, really sort of misleading. But so now as I mentioned to you, I wanted to do sort of a bit of carnivore and talk a little bit.
Can I interrupt just 1 second here?
Yeah.
Okay. What you just said there, this is one thing that I want to say it. I know I'll forget to say it later, so excuse me here. But when you said they don't look like they do, I've trained bodybuilders. I've trained some bikini fitness competitors, and I've seen people pre-show, post-show. I've seen high-level bodybuilders after a show. Trust me, what you said is absolutely correct. They don't look anything like they do on stage the day after. So what happens is, and photoshopping, I've posted, you've probably seen on my Facebook group or on Instagram, on my page, Twitter, but there's this very easy app that will make you look how you want to look. And I mean, you look amazing. I thought, that is horrible. But we see that, everybody sees that and go, why can't I look like they do? Well, for 3 weeks before the contest, they're dehydrating themselves. I mean, they're depleted. And it's almost to the point or it is to the point, they are absolutely miserable when they're on that stage. And you'll see a lot of them backstage, they have cramps in their legs, cramps in their backs. And so that is not anything. Nobody can stay at that level of leanness and look like that with the stage lighting, with the fake tanning, usually fake tanning, and everything else, a shaved head. So that is an unrealistic image that we all see all the time. And hey, I'm guilty. I'll admit it. And I'm in my mid-50s, and I'll still see somebody. I go, okay, why does he look so much better than me? Again, it's just like, okay, that's why. And you can't look like that all year round. So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to insert that.
But that's a really good point. And I think it has to do with managing expectations, right?
Yes. Yes.
And there's a gentleman who wants to do a consultation with me, and he's 6 feet tall and he's 140 pounds, and he wants to know how to bulk up. Now, I don't know his I don't know his whole history or whatnot. Maybe at one point he weighed 180 and he's been ill or something. But
Yeah, exactly.
if you're 6 feet and you're 140, you're
thin.
probably built, that's the way you are, right? And I use the example of, because earlier you mentioned about not looking like Bruce Lee and finding it frustrating. Well, it's only frustrating if your expectations are unrealistic, right?
Well, as a 16-year-old kid, they have unrealistic expectations. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I use the example, going back to genetics for a second. I mean, dog breeds are like accelerated genetics, right? It's like accelerated evolution because we've crossbred things and whatnot.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have a grandson who lifts, and I know that at times he's experimented with various things, growth hormones and things like that. That really concerns me. And the advice I give to him is say, hey, if you were born a greyhound, then be the best greyhound you can be, because you're never going to be a mastiff.
Yes.
You're never going to be a Saint Bernard. That's just the way it is.
Well, exactly. And you need to embrace that. And I'm gifted. I can get super lean. I get super strong. I mean, I power lifted and I love that. I don't any longer, of course, but well, I mean, I could, but I don't. I don't have the time for that. But do you know my friend Doug Holland? I mean, one of my mentors out of Shreveport, Louisiana. He's a very small guy. And if you looked at him in a t-shirt, you wouldn't even know his shape. You wouldn't think he was a lifter. He's
Who is
one of the
that?
strongest.
Sorry.
Doug Holland.
Oh, yes, Doug. I'm hoping to do it. Yeah, he's amazing.
Oh, you have to. He's just an hilarious guy. But yeah, I mean, Doug's not very tall. He's like, he said he used to be really tall. He's 5'4", but he said he's shrunk and he's 5'3" now. But he's 140 something to 150, and also he does the carnivore way of eating as well. But he's in his early 60s, and he's stronger now than ever. I mean, it's just crazy how strong he is. I mean, he'll put on weights, like 100 some pounds of weights, and do pull-ups, and it's just amazing. Now, that is his genetic forte, and there are reasons for that, but he could have never been hugely successful or professional bodybuilder. That wasn't in his genetic card. But again, don't confuse what you're good at and what you're bad at. Think, oh, well, I'm just hopeless. You have to prioritize certain areas. And again, why do you hear this? Arthur Jones talked about, well, why do these certain people that have the big shoulders and the long arms and they gravitate towards swimming? They're good at it, And if you're 4'10" and you're a guy and you're very thin, probably the NBA is not your first choice as a career. Maybe a horse jockey or something like that. So we have to look at our genetics and see what they're good at. And most people in professional bodybuilding, they didn't know they had those genetics. They were in high school or junior high playing football or some sport, and they started lifting, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, everybody's like, what'd you do? What'd you do different? What are you eating? I don't know. I just eat. What do you all eat? And they're huge. And that's how they discover that's how Mike Mentzer discovered it, but that's how others have too. It's usually by accident when they discover they have that gene that they can do that.
One of the guys I competed against had been a gymnast before he ever lifted weights. And people, because he already had this great build, people said, you should think about getting into bodybuilding. And he says, and that's when I started lifting weights. So he had a good physique before he ever started lifting weights.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and you were mentioning Doug Holland before. He was quite successful in powerlifting.
Oh,
a great,
amazing.
Yeah, and that's the other thing we could get off on another tangent is, Arthur Jones spent a lot of time towards the end of his career trying to really define the word strength and do strength essay and say what strength actually is. And just this morning, I was listening to a podcast from this guy from the University of South Florida, which is where a lot of the Nautilus and MedX stuff, I think, is done. And, the old saying, it doesn't seem to matter for hypertrophy, you've heard lately, whether you do light weights for long TUL but he says, if you want strength, then you have to lift a weight. And then he did point out that it's a skill component. But he said strength. He referred to strength. Well, to me, that's just obviously if you're going to compete in a powerlifting to do 1 rep max deadlifts or bench presses, you need to practice that in order to do it. But that's all skill.
That's a skill, and that's why we try to separate skill from resistance training. And that's where a lot of people get confused. I mean, and I think the easiest way for me to visualize this, and it's been said many different ways, it's not what I am doing to the weights or the machine, it's what it is doing to me. And that's not just about hypertrophy. If you're only in it for hypertrophy, that's very shallow, I would say. It's the other things, and who really talks about this so well is Dr. Doug McGuff. Ryan Hall does too. Bart Kay is another one that talks about this. But the whole cascade of the dance between myokines and cytokines, all the stuff that it works, the pyruvic acid and how it moves around the body. There's so much more to it than just lifting. You get a good blood pump, and then all of a sudden your muscles are huge, and that is so shallow. There's a lot more to it, especially if we're looking at total health span. I've seen a lot of lifters. I know you have too, I'm sure. You've seen a lot of people that lift and they're not healthy, or they're doing long-term damage in the way that they lift that's not long-term healthy. So there's a lot more to it than just getting stronger. But yes, if you're a power lifter, that is a skill set. It's not just about being strong. It's about knowing how to do it. Resistance is helps in that, but you've got to practice what you're actually going to do. And we'll go back to Bruce Lee even. Bruce Lee said this, and he's so right. He's been proven right over and over on this. But he said, if you want to get better at running, you need to run. If you want to get better at fencing, you need to fence. If you want to get better at boxing, you need to box. Do the actual thing you want to get better at. And so many times, and this came in through the 80s, Nike kind of brought this on, Nike. Well, let's cross train. Hey, we can sell more shoes if everybody cross trains. So if you want to get better at running, well, let's have you, hip hop through these tubes here or these tires. Let's have you do this. Let's have you do, now it's came up to CrossFit. Now we're going to take a hammer, a sledgehammer, and hit a tire. Okay, if I'm doing a sport where I need to hit a tire and do it repeatedly, that's a great option. But if I'm just wanting to get healthier, that's not. And they've turned exercise into a sport. And if that's what they want to do, that's fine. I have no problem with that if that's what they choose to do. But it's not just about getting healthier. It's about doing a sport of exercise. And I never wanted to be the best at exercise. I use exercise as a tool to better my health.
Well, and it's about demonstrating rather than building, right? So
exactly.
Even going back, Wayne Gretzky looks at in hockey today, they have all these kids doing all these drills. Yeah. And Wayne Gretzky, I said, I think, he got better at playing hockey by playing shinny, right? Just get on and play hockey and just keep playing hockey. And I think he's on to something there.
Is hockey a thing in Canada?
Yeah, a little bit. So
I thought just a little bit, yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that we had time to cover a little bit on carnivore. So the first thing I wanted to ask you for was a bit of a definition, and there may not be one definition because I've been sort of exploring it a little bit. And I ran into the work of, I think it's Paul Saladino. Mm-hmm. And now somebody else, I can't remember who now, referred to Paul as sort of being the black sheep among the carnivore crowd, because Paul is basically meat and fruit and claims to consume anywhere between 200 and 300 grams of carbs. 400, he said. Yeah, a day. And he points out that that's not his blanket recommendation, but because he's a surfer and he surfs every single day and does a lot of work. But so, but to me, the idea of not being straight and having that, but that's one definition. But a lot of people would define carnivore as strictly animal-based, and others, my understanding, would exclude dairy. And you know, still others, when I look at I remember his name, the guy who has the world record for rowing.
Sean Baker.
Yeah, Sean Baker. It seems like he almost eats exclusively beef. Never mind just animal products. He almost exclusively eats one particular animal, right?
Yeah.
So maybe is there one definition, or is carnivore more of a spectrum?
I think the definition's the problem, and you know, of course, we run into different definitions, and I see so many people that are mistaken, you know, on these terms, and unfortunately, we don't help the matter ourselves. And it's kind of like in high intensity training. The terms that we use sometimes are so complicated that people don't understand them. They're TUL, what's it? TUT, you know, or what is high intensity training? Is that the same as high intensity interval training? You know, so we kind of have those same things here. Carnivore is no different. Probably the jargons don't help, but you know, people say, well, you got herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. You also have facultative carnivores. That would be what we would be.
Sorry, what was that last one?
Facultative carnivore.
Facultative? Okay.
That would be what a wolf would fit into. Can we eat other things? Yes. But we are very high level carnivores as far as meat dominant, animal based dominance. You take our primate friends here, the gorillas. Well, they traded their brains for guts. We traded our guts for brains. And because we can hunt, we can do stuff. I mean, we can do a lot of different things. Everybody goes, well, we're the same. We're omnivores just like they are. Well, they have so much more intestinal ability to do things, break down matter. We don't have that. We're more in the realm of, like I said, wolves. So I think that's one of the areas that we kind of get misled on. Do I think 100% carnivore is the way of most people? No, I do not think that. Do I advocate that? No. Although I'm accused of that all the time? No. I would say the natural state of most of mankind up until the last few centuries is what some people call hypercarnivore. Again, we're going into jargon, so I'm trying to make this as simple as I can. That would be a person that does 70% animal-based products. Now, that could be anything that's technically animal-based. I don't consider honey animal-based.
Can I throw in a quick question?
Anytime.
When you use 70%, that can be measured by weight.
Weight
Can be measured by calories.
Could be. Calories or
gram. When I say grams, because of course, depending on fats. Or am I splitting hairs here?
It could be, but I think a better thing is definitely the amount, the weight of food, the mass that you intake. I would think that would be the better way of doing it. So many calories are empty. I mean, you know, they don't weigh hardly anything, but they're loaded full of, you know, crap. So I think mass would probably be the easier way than trying to look at a unit of heat, which I guess we could use BTU if we wanted to. I mean, it's the same. And I think that kind of falls apart, some of those arguments on just the calories. So I think the mass that you eat would be a better term for sure. But outside of just a few regions, most societies up until modern times were eating probably around 70% animal-based products. That would be any type of meat, eggs, dairy, cheese, butter, you know, any of that would fall in that category. In America, up until, and I'm taking this from Nina Tykos, who wrote the book Big Fat Surprise, up until 1920, so 103 years ago, the average adult male ate 22 grams or less. The average is 22 grams of carbohydrates per day. Now we're up over 300 grams per day. That's in 100 years. And it's not, and this is another thing, it's not just the carbohydrates. We don't want to say it's just that's not it either. It is what is contained in a lot of the foods that we eat today and how they're processed, and the industrial seed oils, the additives, the different things like that. So with Paul Saladino, he kind of came onto this in a 100% carnivore way, But then he started. He said he was getting, cramps. He was having this problem and that problem. So he added the fruit. He didn't have those problems. And if that helps, I'm fine with it. But I'm not going to say I'm a vegan. But I eat bacon. I eat about 400 grams of bacon a day.
Right.
That's just not right. And you can't eat 300 to 400 grams of sugar a day or carbohydrates a day and say you're a carnivore. That is just, the term is just incorrect on that.
Right.
And I know he disagrees with everybody that calls him out on that, but he's kind of went all over. He's been everywhere. I mean, his first book was amazingly good. And then he's kind of just departed from all of that. And I think some people just love sugar and will find any reason to eat it. And I get it. It's highly addictive. I understand. It has a huge presence.
Well, and I, I'll be honest with you, when I have so just to put it into perspective, so where I'm coming from, first of all, there's no question in my mind that animal products are incredibly nutrient dense and incredibly nutritious. I have no doubt in my mind, well, no doubt, maybe is a strong way of putting it, but I certainly do not find it hard to believe that human beings could survive and thrive without eating any fruit or vegetables or anything.
Exactly.
I don't have a problem with that. And I do think that most people would benefit greatly by increasing their consumption. Because one of the things I've noticed with some of my clients is, and I look at it, it's amazing how many people, I was surprised by this, do not consume even the minimum required daily allotment for protein.
Oh, all the time.
And I see that a lot. And then I try to get people to increase their protein. And it feels like pulling teeth, which to me is mind-boggling, because, a chicken breast or a small steak is you don't have to eat very much of that to get your protein way up, but some people seem to really struggle with that. But anyway, so there's no question in my mind that adding more animal products into most people's diet would be beneficial. And typically where I eat very little processed food.
Very good. Yeah.
But my wife makes salads and we eat sweet potatoes, we eat stuff, and I eat very few grains as well. I won't say none, but that is like very much the exception. Wow, what a beautiful cat that is.
That was my Bengal cat. He decided to come make an appearance. Well, is he down there?
Yeah, beautiful colors.
Thank
and
you.
So there's no question in my mind, I guess, and when it got me off on this tangent, when you said it was addictive, is, when I have like some sweet potatoes with some peppers and stuff, my wife's made a stir fry and whatnot, and I think about going carnivore. I go, I'd have to give this up. But now, one of the things that my impression is that carnivore is the ultimate elimination diet. So if you're having issues with autoimmune, various things, that a way to go is to start off by going totally, maybe not start off, but eventually going totally carnivore, and then slowly, if you wish to, reintroducing various things to see how they affect you and see how well you tolerate them. And before I get your comment on that, because the other thing, other than not enough protein, is I think when we think of foods that are good for you or bad for you, whatnot, and people will demonize carbs one day and fat the other day and everything else. I suspect that the human body can manage pretty well as long as the overall calories are not excessive. In other words, let's say, for example, that your daily caloric maintenance is 2,000 calories, just to pick a number, right? And you get sufficient protein, which means that you're probably consuming anywhere from 40 to 60% of those calories as protein. You probably just don't have enough calories left in your daily allotment to eat too much of anything. Right? And because what people do is they tend to just eat too much food, period.
Mindlessly.
but challenge me. You know, I just want you. I'm not saying this is the way.
You're wrong.
And that's
You're
my
wrong.
thinking. There we go. But you know, where would you come at it from that point of view?
Well, I mean, I don't measure calories. I used to be an over tracker. I know you like to track. I used to track everything. If it went in my mouth, I tracked it. I mean, I kept charts. I have charts. I track zero things anymore. I for my Facebook group for my clients, I will track some things, but it became almost OCD. I kind of have that little OCD tendency a lot anyway, and yeah. So I don't track any of that. So I'm into minimalization. So that helps me. It's something I don't have to worry about. And I know the amounts I'm eating. I don't track the calories. I could probably give you a rough estimate and stuff. You're right though. If you eat dense, high quality nutrition that does not have the anti-nutrients, the things that block out our absorption, which many things do. Many of the things that we consider healthy are told that are healthy. They have so many anti-nutrients, you can't get the benefit of it. So if you eat steak, for instance, and that's pretty much, I just live on beef. I would say of every calorie I take, it's either beef or eggs. Butter would be in there too. Done that for almost 10 years now. So since 2018, zero carb, 100%. But since 2014, almost no carbohydrates, almost all beef, eggs, butter, salt I use to season, and water. But going back to me, if I ate two big, huge ribeyes and some eggs, do you think I have, even if I could, do you think I would even have room to eat some rice cakes or, whatever, or dessert? I just don't have it. And you're so satiated. We always make a joke too. Go ahead and let them eat. If we have friends over, me and my wife will say, yeah, let them eat all the carbohydrates they want. We got them chips they can eat or whatever they bring, and they're going to be hungry again in an hour. What else we got to eat? I eat. My wife eats as I do too, and we are almost never hungry again. Minimum 18 to 20 hours minimum, and a lot of times I can even go a couple of days and not even think about eating. It's just so satiating. And when you override those satiation signals that we have, you're never full. You feel like you're never full. You'll eat till you think you're full, and then you're hungry again a few minutes later, an hour later. That's not how we evolved at all. We didn't our ancestors even recently, they did not eat 6 meals a day. They didn't calculate everything like that. Our ancestors long ago, they didn't do that either. And so I think so many of the things that we have been led to believe, things I believed even 15 years ago or less. I am shocked that I believe some of that stuff because that's what we have been told and pounded in our head. And through my nutrition classes and other things, that's what I was trained. You need to eat at least 6 meals a day. You need to divide your protein up. You can't absorb more than 25, 30 grams of protein at one time. If you don't have vitamin C, you're going to get scurvy. We got to have the fiber. You can't have a bowel movement without fiber. Well, I'm doing everything improperly according to all of that. I've never been healthier. I've got the health records to prove it. I don't take vitamin D supplements. I do everything ancestrally. My vitamin D was at the top. Actually, it was 0.10 over, but it was 100.1 in how we measure it here on my blood markers. I have no deficiency of vitamin C, although I don't supplement with vitamin C. So many of the things that I was taught have been shown to be wrong. I take zero fiber. I have no bowel issues. But and to back up, I know you know this because we just talked about it earlier. The reason I came into this was not that I want to be a carnivore. I actually had been plant-based at one point. My wife too, who is now carnivore. I came into this for health reasons. Yeah.
Well, just a quick comment. The 25 to 30 grams maximum absorption at one time. My understanding, I heard it, I read that when they did that, they were using, whey protein isolate, which is very quickly absorbed.
Your insulin through the roof.
And whereas, like if you're having a steak, it takes a lot longer to digest a steak.
Absolutely.
And if you will, it's slow release.
Slow release. You're right.
Right. So now going back to what we were talking about earlier about bodybuilders not looking, really So one of the things that bodybuilders try to do when they're peaking for a contest is they try to have the proper balance of water retention and glycogen. So you'll probably be familiar that if you don't have enough glycogen in your muscles,
Yeah.
you may look ripped, but you'll look small.
Yeah, you'll look flat, as they call it.
You'll look flat, right?
Yeah.
And if you have too much glycogen in water, then you look big, but you'll look smooth, is the way they
That's
refer
right.
to it. So they're always trying to find that balance of you want size, but you still want cuts, as they say, in definition between the muscle. So where was I going with this? Oh yes. So if you're carnivore, what does that do? And maybe it doesn't even matter, but if you were competing in a bodybuilding contest and you were trying to maximize your glycogen stores, because that's the other thing about muscle size is, muscle is almost impossible to measure because muscle is not, it's like it gets bigger and smaller on any given day, depending on how much water and glycogen you're retaining. So what about eating meat and getting glycogen in your muscles? Is that something your body eventually adapts to and it's irrelevant after a while?
It kind of is. I mean, you technically, like the cornea of your eyes, have to have glucose. There's no other way around it. There's other things in certain processes that you have to have glucose. So if I'm not taking glucose, how do I get it? Well, my liver gives me all I need. It's on demand. And it's kind of like with cholesterol. Everybody demonizes cholesterol. Almost all the cholesterol is made in your liver. It's not what you eat. And so through also gluconeogenesis. So when you eat protein, that will be broken down into sugar as needed, not excess. And it's such a fine line. I mean, you can have just a small amount of excess sugar and it goes into your blood, and that can really impair a lot of different things. And now everybody's hyperinsulinemic. I mean, almost everybody is. And your body knows how to regulate that. So through the protein, and it's called gluconeogenesis or GNG, that will convert to any of the amount of glucose I need for any function in my body. Now, if a bodybuilder needed some, and I do know some, Zach Bitter, not a bodybuilder, he's an ultra long runner, a marathon runner, and he will take maybe just a small amount before a run. He may take just a little bit of rice, and just to get like 10 grams of carbohydrates. And I know some of the carnivore bodybuilders, they'll take a little bit of a small amount of carbohydrates to get those muscles to flare up. So you're for something like that, probably a small amount is great. I have no problem with that at all. But there's no other need for it unless you're looking at a performance or some type of enhancement for that. So that's probably a big misconception. If you're not getting glucose, how do you have glucose for all these different functions? And again, thank your liver for that.
Well, and so the next question I have, and this is probably one of the reasons. So there's a saying, hope springs eternal, right? And the muscle magazines, I've been training for 40 years. And people would say, you're 64 years old, you've been training for 40 years. At this point, you're in a maintenance state. But you know what? You sort of go down kicking and scratching, and you're always looking to see if you can't just get a little more muscle, a little more whatever. And of course, that's what leads people to really unhealthy things like drug use and like that when they completely lose perspective. But, I would be lying if I didn't admit that I spent more time, in the mirror before I go take a shower after I've done the workout, to check it out. So,
I never do that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So hope springs eternal, right? You're always susceptible to the latest workout, the latest supplement, the latest whatever.
Greatest.
If there's just a little chance. So that's where I'm going with this is, if when you went carnivore, if I went carnivore, let's say for the next 3 months, I went straight carnivore and really applied myself and whatnot, would you predict that I would gain muscle, or it's more of a health thing rather than that? Because I'm thinking, and I look back on the old, you talk about Piri Raider and whatnot, and the old super squats and, a gallon of milk. And those, if you look at the old book, Super Squats by Randall Strawson, I'm guessing you ran into that one.
Yep.
You know, they were drinking a gallon of milk, and
Yep.
it was probably raw milk
Raw milk, unpasteurized. Yep.
back in the day. And then if you look at they did have bread, but they were eating meat. They were eating meat breakfast, lunch, and supper. And I know that Geronda was pretty much carnivore, right?
Yes, he was. He would take a break. He said he wanted to get his glycogen stores at peak level, so he would take a break during the weekends. But he was steak and eggs. That's why they called him Mr. Steak and Eggs. And so he would add in a lot of times he'd add in raw milk and a few other things like that to get his glycogen stores up. So he was steak and eggs like 5 days to 6 days a week, and then at least 1 to 2 days he was done.
So let's say, for sake of saying, I'm 94% of my genetic potential as we speak.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm keep fighting and scratching for that other 6%, or maybe getting from 94 to 97. Would the carnivore diet, in your opinion, help?
It could, or it could hinder. And I know that's a really wishy-washy answer. The way to answer that properly would be you said 3 months. 3 months not going to give you enough time. Your body is going to be kicking and screaming. The last time you were probably, unless you've been ketogenic at all, last time you probably were ketogenic or using ketones was when you were a baby. That's probably the last time, and that's how most humans are. So your body can't really. It's not like these cars that can just flip a switch and they can run either this type fuel or they can go electric or they can, different things like that. It would take a while to not only learn how to make them, but also learn how to utilize them. So there's a learning curve in there that your body has to figure this out, and it's very inefficient. So it will make, and people that are on keto, they measure their ketones. Oh my goodness, I'm really doing great. My ketones are really high. And then you'll see some carnivore. If we check I don't check, but if you check your millimolars, mine might be 1.5, and you got somebody doing a high fat keto, theirs might be 4 or something. Well, if your body can make them, but it doesn't know how to utilize them, it doesn't really matter. So your body gets very efficient in anything it does. So I don't need a lot for my performance. So when your body figures that out, if you were not eating enough protein or protein that was absorbable, and so many proteins, you can look, well, soybeans or edamame or whatever whey, it has this great profile, but it has so many downsides, whether it be it's going to spike the glucose in the body, as whey will do, and sometimes shoot up the insulin. So you're almost like you're eating dessert. People don't, well, it doesn't have any sugar in it. Well, whey is very insulinemic. So it's not the best protein for sure. You look at some of these other proteins, soy protein, almond protein, pea protein, those have a lot of anti-nutrients, and you're getting certain amino acids, but you're not getting the complete profile. And the only way to get that complete profile is through animal proteins. Beef is the tops. I mean, that and eggs are right up there too. That you will actually absorb and get into your muscles. So if you were getting low quality protein or not enough protein, within probably 6 months to a year, yeah, you're going to get some gains. But as somebody that is mid 50s and you're early 60s, we almost have to chase the illusion of gains. I am not going to put on, I don't care what I do, if it's all natural, I'm not going to put on 10 pounds of muscle in a year. It is not going to happen. I've been training now since I was 10, so 44 years I've been training. Let's just say the last 40 years I've been doing it the right way, because I really didn't know what I was doing when I was 10 years old, or didn't know what I was doing as well. So my gains have already been hit a long time ago. Now, do you want to just try to maintain? If you try to maintain, you're going to regress. You need to always be pushing forward. But I measure my gains in my level of strength, my HRV levels, how well I'm sleeping, my recovery index. I measure that through my Oura ring generally. My VO2 max, I measure that. I see where that's at. I think there's a lot of other ways we can measure it. So I think carnivore for the long term, yes, it could help. Do you need to be 100% carnivore? Probably not. I would say, again, if you're in that 70% range, that's good enough. Again, the reason I'm 100%, first of all, I love it. I didn't go into it for that. I even came from a plant-based background. My wife did too. It was for autoimmune issues. And I had a crippling form of rheumatoid arthritis. And my rheumatologist told me in my 30s that the time I was in my early 50s, I would need walking aids, and probably, a wheelchair would be in my future after that. And I was getting to the point I couldn't even write. My fingers were starting to the turn. I was not able to do this at all. Could not get my ring on and off. My thumbs were not working. So yeah, I mean, so many things happen like that, that were just getting worse and worse. So that's why I went to a carnivore way of eating.
So just a little thing, the ring you had, it's Aura.
Or a ring, yes, it's an Aura.
So I got a Fitbit watch, and I don't put any stock in that 10,000 steps a day or 150 minutes a week of activity.
Yeah.
I do think I do like there's one aspect of it that measures if you've got 250 steps in so many hours per day, because I do think getting up often and moving around, which of course, if you've got machines that are plate loaded and you're training people, you're getting up all the time to move plates around.
Oh yeah, constantly.
So, but the recovery factor in the Fitbit app, I thought would be kind of a cool thing. But I realize now that it's really based just on a little bit on sleep, and it's based on how many active minutes I've done in the last 3 days, and that's how they measure recovery.
Yeah.
Which to me has nothing to do with what I think of as recovery from a strength training workout. What's the mechanism by which the Aura Ring determines your recovery?
Several factors. HRV being the primary one, and that's the one I really tend to side with.
Just for listeners, HRV is heart rate variation.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
And to make it so that they even understand a little better, that is what is checked when they check the babies, when a mom's carrying a baby in her womb. That's what they check to see if the baby's in any kind of distress. So it's one of the primary indications of stress, physically, mental, or otherwise, that you get in your body. It's the variability between the spaces in between the heartbeat. And this has been proven over and over. Now, there is no one size fits all. This kind of goes back to genetics too. My HRV may be, really, really high up. Mine actually isn't. Mine's actually pretty in the middle of the range, but that's my normal. So it learns your normal. And I crashed it last week. I have a 200 plus acre farm, and I actually got in, which I don't usually care about measuring, but I got close to 25,000 steps a few days last week. Right. And so my HRV absolutely crashed. My readiness score crashed. They also check body temperature, respiration, oxygen saturation. Your activity score is part of it. Your sleep score is part of it as well. But there's several different things. And your resting heart rate is another big indication as well throughout the day. And if you at night, how it drops down, when it drops down. So there's a lot of things they take into that. I do recommend all my clients to have one. I don't get any money from Aura. I've used their Generation 1 ring when they first came out. I've helped them in some of their testing. I don't get any kind of financial gain. I mean, if they offer, hey, I have no shame. I'll take it. But I think they're a great device. I do have an Apple Watch. I've used some Garmin devices. I don't find them anywhere close as my readiness and the sleep stuff. And I've actually had to do a sleep study a couple of times, and it was almost identical, all my scores on that from a professional sleep study.
So HRV, my Fitbit measures it, and I can look at it, but what it doesn't tell me, it tells me what it is, but what's desirable, a higher number or a lower number?
It's so individualistic, it's hard to say. Generally, you want to think of a higher number, but there's also a kind of a U-shaped curve on that too. I mean, if it stays highly elevated too much, that may be you're too amped up. So there's kind of a happy medium in that. I used to do years ago before the Aura, I used to have another way of tracking it, and it compared it to all these other fitness geeks, and I was like, why is mine not as good? And they explained it. They had people that explained why that is. So my average, I know my average all the way back to 2014 or 15, and it has, as my fitness got better, and again, long story, but I had a pretty major accident in 2009 and had to have major surgery in 2011. and my health just went downhill. So I even gained over 75 pounds of pure muscle. No, it was pure fat. So I had a horrible time. So 2014 was kind of my turnaround year. And that's when everything happened and the autoimmune issues started kicking in. So I know all of that. And as my health has gotten better, my HRV has gone up. But we're talking, gradually, nothing like it went from 40 on average and it's now 120. So that's pretty independently associated with each person.
Okay, all right. So this has been really interesting, and we need to do it again.
Yeah, I'd love to. Hopefully, I didn't get too far in the weeds on different things. I tend to do that sometimes. So just redirect me. And
I think it's great actually, and like I said at the beginning, I try to keep these conversational, and that's what this has been. So today, what I've been doing recently, and it's because I work from home and I've got all these toys.
Yeah.
And I work out every day. Pretty much, not every single day, but pretty much. But it'll be one set. Like earlier, before I went to take a shower, I did a set of Nautilus pullovers. Yeah. Yesterday, I did a set of leg presses. And sometimes I'll do 3 or 4, and occasionally I'll do 5, but those are very much the exception. Typically, I'm doing a total of less than 10 sets a week.
Yeah.
And I do it because I can. I realize that my clients and whatnot, coming here every day to do one set, no sense at all. And I think at the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot.
It doesn't.
I think there's a lot of hair splitting that takes place.
Oh my goodness, way too much. Are you familiar with Arthur Devaney? Have you heard of that guy?
Yes, I know. Yeah, Art Devaney. Okay. Yeah.
Now Arthur is my hero. I mean, I want to be as healthy as he is, and he's up in his 80s.
Yeah.
But he's taken the approach you have, and he has a very good explanation for it. And he was a well-known economist in the United States, so he's got that analytical mind. He does every day, or at least 6 days a week, he'll do one exercise, high intensity exercise, once a week, and he's very minimalistic. I mean, it's very, it may just be a pull-up bar, maybe something outside, but he will go to failure. The reason, and this kind of coincides with what we know, and especially people want to go look at Dr. Doug McGuff talking about all the ins and outs of what was really going on in your body after you lift weights or when you're lifting weights and afterwards. He says you need that hit of all those good hormones and good things that it does, the myokine, cytokine dance with each other. You need to get that as often as you can. So that's why he does his every day, but just one set or one exercise generally is what he does.
Yeah, well, and I mean, even if somebody did, and I always find, again, we could get off, I'm running out of time, but I've heard different people these days. Al Coleman, you probably know Al Coleman, and Fred Hahn. And make sort of blanket statements about twice a week being better than once a week, and twice a week is the way to go. Yeah, I struggle with that. So first of all, when somebody says better results, I don't actually know what they mean by that. So in other words, if we only have our genetic potential, does it mean that we will get there quicker than we would have otherwise, knowing that most of the gains that most people will make will largely be in the first year of training?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, if let's say you did once a week, or you did one set a day for 7 days a week, or whatever it is, as long as you're progressing, then you'll get to your genetic potential at somewhere around the same time. If you get better results, that means you get there in 8 months instead of 13 months. And if so, who cares?
Yeah, and I doubt you're even stating that correctly. I doubt it would even be that much of a difference. I would say they'd get there probably less time than what you were even saying. The difference would be less. And again, Mark Kay, he always talks about all these nutritional studies and all these muscle building studies and everything. He said, did they really do that right? Think about that. Did they actually get genetic identical twins, monitor them 24 hours a day? They did the exact same thing they were supposed to be doing. They ate the exact same way all during the test, and they did it long enough to have a washout period in between. Of course they didn't. And most of these studies you see from wherever, if you get down into the guts of it, a lot of it's self-reporting surveys is more what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have a problem. I pretty much know what I eat every day because it's so simple. But most people couldn't tell you what they ate a few days ago.
Right.
And a lot of these, they'll just fill out a form, an online form every once a week. Okay, the training protocol, a lot of times that's even self-reported. So a lot of this stuff, I don't buy these studies, but I think a lot of it is up here more so than even in the muscles itself. If 2 days a week works great, I think that's awesome. If you like a full body, that's great. If you like a split body, it's great. I prefer a split body. I love split body workouts. I can get more into it. I have clients that do once a week full body. I have clients that do twice a week full body. I have clients that do a 3 different split in a week. I have others that do a lower body, upper body. Generally, my split clients, and this is me saying this because I don't have any study to prove it, they generally get much better benefits and results than the ones that do it once a week. But not always. That's not always the case. So I think it's very, very unique to the person. And I think since I am pro split body, I think I'm going to see that because of my confirmation bias. And everybody has it. The only people that don't have it, well, they may be, I don't know, they may be a robot that don't have it or something, but everybody has a confirmation bias.
Right, right. Well, and actually, you talked about the mind, and again, we have to do this again because there's a lot of places I think we could take deeper dives on.
Yeah.
I have come to the conclusion, people have accused Ellington Darden of writing the same book 50 times because Ellington always comes up with the new, rep scheme or whatever it is, or different things. But I think that if people can believe in what they're doing, whether it's volume training, whether it's not volume training.
Yep.
That's why earlier I wanted to point this out about the genetics thing and being a cop-out or not, is if you buy into the muscle building magazines and you really believe, whereas if you convince yourself that, your genetics are limited and you won't get great results, some of these can become self-fulfilling prophecies.
Exactly. Placebo is the most powerful medicine or tool on the face of the earth. And so much is, I have a degree in clinical psychology. I don't let everybody know that. But I do something that probably almost no other HIT instructor does. And they're not doing it wrong. They're actually right as well. We're both right. It just depends on which one you want to go with. But especially in full body, they always say, train your large muscles first, or you won't get the amount of intensity out because they'll be too fatigued later. I do that opposite. I train the smaller muscle groups first, and then I go to the larger. The reason I'm looking at it from a psychological viewpoint, and I've been training people since the 90s, so I've seen this firsthand. When, let's just say they do heavy deadlifts, or they're doing a leg press or whatever, they are just, they're going to failure. They are done. They are done. Their heart rate has already got up to 160 or something like that. We could wait and let them recover for a little bit and go into that. But I would rather do, a chest press, overhead press, a pull down first. Their heart rate is up. It's elevated. It will get high, but nothing like when you do lower body to failure.
Right.
And again, is that better than doing it the other way? To me, it is. I see their point from a physiological standpoint. They're correct, but from the psychological standpoint, I'm correct. You can do that, and if you are given all you have given, it is really hard. And again, I don't have any clients that I'm going to train like they did in the Colorado experiment with Casey Vitor, where they actually would take him off of one machine and they would have two people carry him to the next machine because he was so gassed. And I don't have any clients that are wanting to do that. And I don't even really want to do that now. I might be younger. Yeah, I would have loved it, but not now. So I think we have to look at things, what works best, but we've always got our own confirmation bias.
Right. Well, when we look for answers to questions, the reality is that the answers to many questions, not just in strength training, not just in nutrition, but so many things, is it depends.
It depends. Yeah, it depends. And we get so caught up in this tribalism in everything, whether it be carnivore, whether it be vegan, whether it be high intensity versus high volume. And, I'll listen to Dr. Rhonda Patrick. I love Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and I'll have some carnivores. Oh my goodness, she promotes plants all the time. Okay, she's still got some great information. I've learned so much from her on different things about sauna use, about heat shock proteins. Dr. Peter Attia, I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I have learned a lot from him. So many times we go, okay, you're not in my camp, you're not in my tribe, so therefore I can't listen to anything you say. That is so close-minded and small-minded.
Well,
yeah.
And that's why, here's a potentially huge tangent, which we won't go into, I won't have time, is why this whole idea of certain people spreading misinformation or disinformation and some people wanting to control that is so scary.
It is.
Because the fact is, especially when it comes to medicine and whatnot, is there's so many things. So, like if you think about it, you've been talking about carnivore, somebody else is talking about veganism. Well, one of you is probably right and one of you is probably wrong, or more likely, there's probably some elements of truth in both. But are you going to turn around and say somebody's going to decide that one of you is spreading this information and stop you from, making your points? And
that's what I'm afraid of. And I do not want to shut down any vegans. I don't want to shut down anybody obviously if somebody's promoting, well, you need to go out and, eat some sulfuric acid, that's really good for you. That's a little different. But, I don't want to shut down the other side. I mean, again, if I'm comfortable in my argument or my side, I shouldn't be fearful of their arguments. And most people are fearful that they can't, uphold what they believe and defend it. So why would I want to shut down somebody else's opinions?
As John Galt had said, he said, if you convince me of something, then we both win, because That's exactly right. I've learned we're both smarter now. Listen, this has been great. I'm running out of time, but I keep adding other things because I think we could talk for a long time. So this has been really enjoyable. And I will let you go for now. And this will probably be a couple of weeks before I get it up on, depending on when I can do it. But certainly we will see you on social media. And I really appreciate your taking the time today. And
enjoyed it.
Feel free to send me all contact info that you have so that I can ensure that people who want to reach you, who would like to be your client, whatnot, can do so.
That sounds great. And I'm not doing any online clients. I stopped doing that. I just don't have time for that anymore. So I just do one-on-one clients, and I'm not really looking to take any more. But I will a few. But I'm pretty well booked out.
All right. Well, that's good.
Richard, I enjoyed it.
Good. Likewise. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. You too.